introduce our first speaker. So Bina is here. Bina
Champaneria.
Now, I did know that.
It's okay.
I did know that, but I forgot to practice it a minute just before I stood up here. So Bina came and spoke at our Lightning Talks back in December. She did a fantastic job of that. It was super good. She's back today. So Bina is a coach and a trainer of a whole range of things. I will leave it to her to finish off her introduction, and she's going to talk about communication tonight. Something that nobody can be good enough at, can't they? Or you can always improve at. So with that, please give Bina a really warm welcome.
Thank you, Roy. But I want to say thank you to you guys. I mean, I never imagined how many people would come here tonight, because I nearly didn't come here tonight. I thought, how am I going to get over from Shipley, which is not that far away, but, you know, am I going to get the train and stuff? So the fact that you're all here is fantastic. So I'm really, really pleased. Thank you. I don't know why I'm nervous. A little bit nervous, because I shouldn't be. I used to work at a university and I used to lecture to first year students, 150 students in a lecture hall, but probably they weren't all paying attention like you're doing. So maybe that's why I'm a bit nervous. But anyway, we're here to talk about communication. And we do that every day. It's part of our everyday life. In fact, I'm communicating to you now, aren't I? I'm trying to pass some information on. So I thought it'd be good to start with a definition of communication. It's a fairly recent one from the Oxford English Dictionary. So what is communication? The transmission or exchange of information, knowledge, or ideas by means of speech, writing, mechanical or electronic media. So we know that it's fairly recent because we've got electronic media here. I mean, there was a time when everything was written by hand, wasn't it? So that's what communication is about. And I'll show you shortly what the agenda is going to be. What are we going to explore regarding communication? But I just want to give you a little bit of background about me, actually. Where have I come from in the journey, what's brought me here today? Quite a lot of logos there. I've had quite a varied career, actually. I started off, actually, at the college in Leeds. I studied fashion for 3 years, worked in the fashion industry, manufacturing and so on. Then I ended up working for some CAD/CAM systems suppliers that sold equipment to design and manufacture garments to companies. So I ended up being a trainer for those, worked for a retail company. That was really my first project manager job, installing systems. Worked for a construction company as well, based at Dixon's head office. So it's been quite a varied career. But then in 2009, I moved over to the Netherlands. Is anybody from the Netherlands here?
My family.
Ah, right. Zullen we praten in Netherlands?
Klein beetje.
Ah, good, show. Yeah, so I moved over to the Netherlands, worked for a university there, teaching project management and business subjects. It was an international university, so I was communicating in English. I wouldn't be able to do it in Dutch, but that's what my job was. And whilst I was there, I was very lucky to be involved in a project called Green Bubbles, which is about scuba diving. Now, that's my passion. I spoke about that at Christmas time. So that was fantastic. That was interesting because we were working with 9 different partners from different countries, and trying to communicate with them. And that's where you get the cultural differences, the language differences, different perceptions and so on. So that was a very good lesson on working on a project with many, many different organisations. Anyway, I moved back to the UK nearly 5 years ago now, and I ended up working for a couple of universities, managing their projects, different kind of projects. And then about 3 years ago, I left all of that and became self-employed. So I'm an accredited trainer. And maybe some of you have heard of Prince 2. Has anybody heard of Prince 2? Yeah, so these are some of the accreditations that I'm teaching, Prince 2, Agile Project Management and so on. And I've got Scrum Master, but don't ask me, I've not used it, but that's a certification that I took. So what I do is deliver training, and that obviously involves a lot of communication. So the agenda, things I want to talk about, 4 key things, is communication theory. There is some theory behind communication. It's not just about one person saying something and then somebody listening to it. There's a theory, there's a journey that communication goes through. So we'll look at that. Then I'm going to give you some examples of challenges, communication challenges that I've had, and maybe you want to share some as well. And then talk about the actual message itself. And then I'm going to touch a little bit on AI and project communication. Now, I'm not an expert on AI, and probably a lot of you know more about it than I do, but I'm aware of it. You know, I'm interested in it, and I think that's something we all need to do. Yeah? So I'll touch a little bit on that towards the end of the presentation. Now, if communication was a flow, communication had to flow, what does this tell you? Does it suggest if that's the flow of communication? What are your thoughts? It's what, sorry?
The further it goes, the less impact it has.
Less impact, yeah, this is sort of getting smaller. What about receiving communication, the flow of communication?
Gets lost in translation.
Gets lost in translation, yeah. So it could be that on a project you get lots of information, then suddenly it just sort of dies down and nobody gets to know what's going on. What about this then? If this was the way you receive communication, what does this suggest?
Fragmented.
Fragmented, yeah, yeah. There's gaps, isn't there? You hear something, and then you don't hear anything for a while, then you hear something, and then it kind of just fades off and you don't know if it's actually finished or not. So maybe we've experienced this kind of flow of communication on a project, for instance. What about this? What does this suggest? Caps lock. Shouting, yeah. Yeah, no, you should never write an email in caps lock, should you? So we have to think about the tone of communication as well, don't we, really? It's not just what's the message, but how do we actually present it? Who's going to listen to it? So if somebody sees that, they'll think they're being shouted at. What about this one then? This communication? Non-existent, yeah? So maybe you've experienced some of these. So I said I wanted to talk about a theory of communication. So there's a source where the communication comes from, the message itself, how it gets transmitted, and then the person that receives it. And that's a theory. There are many, many theories out there. So I've simplified it. There's one by Shannon and Weaver. Okay. So I think I'd like to just demonstrate this a little bit. So Royd, I'd like you to write a little message or a picture or draw something on this piece of paper for me, please. Yeah, so Royd is a source. He's going to send a message. And we have to think about, you know, the knowledge that the person has at sending a message. Is it technical? Do they have the knowledge of that, for example? What kind of organisation do they come from? So we recognise that that is characteristic of the source, also the characteristics of the person that's receiving it. You know, they may not have knowledge. They may work in a very formal kind of culture, for example. So there are differences between who's sending the message and who's receiving it. And of course, the message itself, what is it? What's in it? How is it presented? How does the person actually receive it? Do they see it? Do they hear it? Do they experience it? And so on. Yeah. So I'm going to take the message from Royd. Yeah. So it's going to wing its way across. And I don't know your name, but you're going to be the receiver. Yeah. So that's the message. So you're interpreting it. Yeah.
It looks like he's driving in a car, but like an electric sort of model car.
Yeah.
But I don't know what that means.
Is that what you were trying to
I was going to
represent?
the pub, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Let's do that again. This time, same message, but... Oh. What's happened there?
It's disappeared. There's no message.
There's no message. It's lost, isn't it? It's fragmented. It's broken. That is known as noise. Whoops, gone too far. Noise. Noise gets in the way, doesn't it, of the message being transmitted. Have you ever tried to phone somebody and, you know, you can't hear what they're saying or they can't hear you? Yeah, it's very difficult to understand, isn't it? And you just can't have a conversation. Or what other examples can you think of where there's noise in communication, where you can't get what they're saying?
Google Chat, well, Microsoft Teams.
Yeah. Yeah. What, technology being flaky?
Yeah, I think
or?
working remotely, is a very common problem, is it not? People's bandwidth and all the other hardware glitches that get in the way.
That's true. We probably all experienced that, haven't they? What about, I mean, I teach a lot of courses face-to-face, but also online as well. And I'm trying to teach people who don't want to put their cameras on. Have you experienced that? Yeah. There's a lot of, that is noise in a way, because you don't know if they're actually interpreting the message, what their thoughts are, if they're actually there, have they gone off somewhere, you know. So this is all noise that comes in. So noise can happen at any part of the journey. You know, the way people are feeling at the moment in time. They might not be listening, they might be distracted and so on. So your message could be really well constructed, but it gets lost somewhere, yeah? And we've all experienced that. So we have to look out for this noise, and it can come in many different shapes and forms. So I'm going to talk about some challenges, and maybe this is where noise came in as well, but anybody recognise, I know you all recognise this flag, anybody recognise these other flags? Which one? Of course. Which one?
Polish.
Poland, yeah. Romania, yeah. Hungary. Yeah, okay. So the challenge I had, now this was a long time ago when I worked for CAD/CAM systems, and I would go train the operators of these systems in these countries. This was before mobile phones, by the way, so maybe some of you remember that time, I don't know, but my job was to train the operators on how to use this CAD/CAM system. So all the menus are in English, and then I would deliver the training, you know, in these different countries to the operators. What do you think the challenges were? What noise could have been introduced during this communication? Language barrier, absolutely. And I had to think very, very carefully about my choice of words. You know, I had to make, okay, they've got to be able to do this. They've got to be able to do this function. How do I explain that? I've got to be very clear. The pace has to be right and everything so that they get the message. But not only that, I would say something, then somebody would translate it and then, you know, give it to the operators. And they would have a think about it. Then they'd ask a question. So it was a slow process, as you can imagine. We had to have somebody translating. But I think what helped me was observing people, you know, face that body language. Oh, that person looks a bit confused, you know, or they're lost, or they seem to get it. So I think that's the beauty of face-to-face communication, is it? Because we can see what's going on, yeah? So that was one experience. Another experience, I did an extra complication, because this time the system was in German, so I had to learn this system. I don't speak German. So I had to learn that and then deliver the training to the Hungarian operators. So there was the added complication of me trying to interpret, what is this? What does this mean? How can I translate that so that they understand it? What did help was I knew the purpose of the system. I knew what these people needed to do. Why were they using the system? So that knowledge of what they needed to do helped. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had a clue. I wouldn't have been able to help them, actually. So it did require a lot of patience. And we did have some funny moments at times. So an example here is that I said, okay, close the window. Yeah, computer window. And the person translating starts looking at all the windows thinking, why does Bina want to close the window now? What's that got to do with it? You know, so it's lost. We could say lost in translation. So we have to be very, very clear on our audience. Who are our stakeholders? What do they need to know? What's their culture? What's their background? What's their learning style, the formality and so on for the message to go through? But of course, these days, we know there are tools that will help us. What about idioms? Has anybody heard of an idiom? These are idioms, yeah? So you've probably heard of raining cats and dogs. So can you imagine if I was in Romania and it was chucking it down? I said, look, it's raining cats and dogs. I think, what is she talking about? You know, use your loaf. There's a Dutch one here you might be familiar with. Helaas pindakaas. So when I moved to the Netherlands, if something went wrong, they'd say helaas pindakaas. I thought, why are you talking about peanut butter? But that means, oh, too bad kind of thing. So there's all these kind of different ways of communicating, which if you're not familiar with. Does anybody know the story about raining cats and dogs? Somebody told me, and I've not checked it, but they said in the olden days when the roofs were made of straw, cats and dogs would sit on the roof. And if it rained too much, the roof gave way and the cats and dogs would come, poor things, would land in the room, you know. So I don't know if that's true. Maybe you want to research it. What about this one? Does anybody know the story behind this one? Well, where was it from? The two Ronnies. Yeah, a chap goes into a shop and says, I want 4 candles. And the guy gives him 4 candles and he's getting really annoyed. What he actually meant was handles for forks. What do you think would have made it easier to explain what he wanted? The chap going in the shop. What do you think he could have done to make it easier? Yeah, a picture. Look, this is what I want. Oh, look, here's my fork. It hasn't got a handle. Yeah. So there's different ways of communicating, isn't there? Not just speaking. It's an old sketch, 1976, but I think, it still makes us laugh, doesn't it, really? What about this one? Chinese whispers. Has anybody heard of Chinese whispers? Yeah. If we had time, I was going to try and do that in the room, but I won't do that. But do you know the story behind this? 1914, some military orders had to be sent from station to station. So somebody would listen to him. Probably there was a lot of noise. They couldn't hear it properly. And then they would relate to the next person, and eventually you think the message would get through. So the message actually was, do you know this one? Send reinforcements, we're going to advance. I don't know after how many iterations really, but the message at the other end was something completely different. Send reinforcements, we're going to advance. It sounds much more exciting, doesn't it, really? So again, you can see that noise factor getting involved. So I titled my talk, Didn't You Read the Email? Have you ever been in that position where you've missed an important email? What happened? Why did you miss it? You didn't intentionally want to, but what happened? Do you want to give us a...
I think I've done that all the time, to be totally honest. I just don't properly check down my email thread, skim over it, miss it.
Yeah.
Genuinely didn't see it.
Yeah. Maybe we get too many emails. Anybody else been in that situation where you missed an important email? Yeah. Email is so easy, isn't it? Just send an email, you think, that's it, I've sent a message, but you don't know if it's got the right email address, if they've actually read it. They've got hundreds of emails, they're not going to look at it. So what do you think the advantages are? I've got positives. We all use emails. What's a positive about using an email? What's good about it?
Yeah.
You've got a record, yeah. Look, I sent it to you on this date. Yeah, you can look back at it. That's true.
It's asynchronous, so you can do it in your own time.
You can do it in your own time. That's true, actually, yeah. So I'm not saying it's a bad way of communicating, but it's not the only way. And I think people think it's the only way. I took this from the famous saying is, didn't you get the memo? Do you remember what film that was from? It was a Batman movie, I think, yeah. And somebody was doing something, I think it's Morgan Freeman, and somebody says to him, didn't you get the memo? He said it to somebody, it's like, well, didn't know what was going on, basically, had no idea what was going on, because the communication wasn't the best method, really. So we can be a bit more creative in our communication. That's what I want to talk about now. Has anybody heard of VARK before? Yeah? All right, okay, good. So is it something you've used or?
Yeah, multimodal. So yeah, it's part of like my mentor kind of ways of working. She kind of uses this to formulate what the next session will be.
Brilliant. Yeah, it stands for visual, auditory, reading, writing, kinesthetic. So visual. And what I say when I'm delivering a training course, I say to my delegates, look, I'm going to explain something to you, but you've got to absorb that information. What's your learning style? Do you like to draw a picture? Do you like to make notes? What do you do? So that's how we absorb information. So when people communicate with us, we are doing that, aren't we? We're absorbing information. Now, visual. What's a visual way of learning?
Watching a video.
Watch what, sorry?
Watching a video.
Watching a video, yeah, that's visual and auditory, that's right. And that's so helpful, isn't it, really? So, yeah, a lot of us, we think that's a good way of learning. What about if you buy furniture from IKEA? Anybody done that? You get this big instruction sheet, don't you? There's no text on it. A lot of pictures of guys putting things together, so there's visual ways of doing something. So we can have pictures, we can have a video, audible, you might listen to a book, listen to a podcast. You're still absorbing information, aren't you? But that's a different way of doing this. Reading and writing, so, maybe some of you are making notes now, or, you go to a webinar or something, you think, oh, I'm going to make some notes, I'll remember something, I'm going to absorb that information. So you can have a mixture of these. Yeah. What's kinesthetic? What does that mean?
Learning by doing.
Learning by doing, yeah, absolutely. So another example, when I'm delivering a course face-to-face, I'll put groups of people, give them a flip chart paper, post-it notes, say, okay, create a breakdown structures kind of thing. So by doing, and that's an advantage of face-to-face. I know you've got tools as well, so we can use all of these to communicate. So maybe a lot of you recognise burn down charts. Yeah? I've even stuck some faces on there to explain clearly what's good and what's not good. But I mean, if you see that, it gives you a clear idea of what's going on. You don't have to sort of read a lot of text. So we can be creative in our visual way of communicating. And kinesthetic, what about this one? Has anybody tried VR? Yeah? Yeah? What was your experience of it?
Oh, it's fantastic for me. Not for her.
It's sick after 1 second.
Did it feel dizzy?
Oh,
right.
It feels unreal, to be honest. Like you move while you're still standing, you go up and down. It's weird, to be honest. But I really enjoy it.
Yeah. It's fantastic, isn't it, really? And a lot of games are played, Matt, but there's a lot of serious applications that people are using with VR as well. You probably know more about it than I do, but that's a way of communicating, is it? That's learning by doing. Anybody done any serious Lego play? Fantastic. What did you think about
These
it?
are the retros where we've got quiet people and trying to get them to become part of the conversation. We know they've got something to offer, but trying to get them to come out. And so we use that as it's something that we're using across the organisation. We've got kits in each of the offices, but we've not tried to do it virtually with one team and another team do it. Even though they've got the kit, we want to use it as an excuse to meet up.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. I had to go to a conference last year, and it was brilliant because we had random pieces of Lego, so with people we hadn't worked with, and somehow we managed to explain our view of what a brave leader is. We get various Lego pieces. So it's quite creative, but it still gives you a chance to communicate, doesn't it? So if you get a chance to have a go, it's well worth doing, I think. Yeah. Just another little example. In Holland, I worked in the Games Academy for a while. So the students would make a paper-based version of the game. So they're visualising it. What is this game going to look like? What's gameplay like? I don't know if anybody is into the games industry, but that helps to communicate. So really, we need a communication plan, don't we? If we're going to communicate on a project, for example, what would you put in a communication plan? And do you have one? What goes in it? Yeah, who the stakeholders are, absolutely. The what? The method, yes. Yeah, method of communication. Who are we going to communicate to? When do they want to know? How do they want to know? Some people have got different preferences. Some people need to give feedback, don't they? Some people might not. So we have to be aware, because communication is about people, isn't it? So we have to be aware of that. And maybe you think about pushing information. So if somebody expects you to send them a report every Friday by email, you're pushing that. They're waiting for you. Whereas if they can serve themselves, they can have access to it, they can pull the information. So maybe you use things like information radiators, big visible charts, that kind of thing. Maybe you've got SharePoint or whatever it is, Jira, whatever it is, people can go access that information themselves. So they're kind of not waiting for you to communicate. So it's about making information available. Now you might laugh at some of these, but does anybody remember telex or fax machine? Yeah, that was a way to communicate, wasn't it? I certainly do. My first mobile phone was actually a car phone. That's not the one, but it's just bizarre, isn't it, how we used to communicate. There was when I worked at Dixon's head office, we had to print off Excel sheets in colour for 10 people who wanted to know what was going on and stick them in their pigeonholes on a Friday. Wednesday, they're still there, actually. I think, what was the point of that? So, we've come a long way, haven't we, really? Communication is so much easier these days. And then let's just go on to a little bit about project management. So Agile Project Management, DSDM, one of the certifications I teach, there's a principle that says communicate continuously and clearly. And then we're all familiar with the Agile Manifesto, talking about individuals and how they interact, how they communicate with each other. So, you know, that's best practice, isn't it, really? I'm just going to go on to a couple of things. I did a bit of research, and there's a company called Workshop. I don't know if anybody's heard of them, but they've got a very, very interesting report. You'll find it online, but there's just a few key takeaways. And they offer their own kind of AI that does a lot of these things. So you're probably using tools nowadays, and they've got their own AI assistant, something like that. Yeah. I was looking at a PDF yesterday, and then suddenly this AI assistant appeared in the corner and said, "Do you want me to summarize a text for you?" I'm like, "Oh, okay, then go ahead," you know. So, I mean, these things are coming in out there, these AI assistants. Even if you've got lots of WhatsApp messages, it can summarize things for you. So we've got so much help out there these days. Now, a couple of years ago, this is a book in question. I didn't write it. I did write a little bit in it, but the guy that wrote this, he wrote a book called AI and the Project Manager, 2022. How the rise of artificial intelligence will change your world. So, I mean, you could say it's quite old now, 2022. And even then, he was saying things like, look, it's going to disrupt project management, but there's a reliance on data, and that project managers need to be able to understand data. That's a key skill for a project manager. Yeah? Well, I don't know if you agree with that or whether you've experienced that, but, you know, it's here to stay. And maybe you're familiar with some of these. Who uses Jira? Yeah, okay, a lot of you. About Gemini. Yeah, you know more about this stuff than I do. I don't use it, but I'm familiar with it. I'm aware of it. And you know what would have helped me when I was translating? Something like DeepL or whatever. What about Otter AI? Has anybody come across that? What does it do?
Is a companion for meeting. It give you like the minute of the meeting or a roundup of the people that join the meeting. I did use a couple of times, but I don't know a lot about it.
I just heard it mentioned the other day when I was in a meeting. Then I got an email saying Otter AI has worked out your meeting. You know, so gone are the days when you have to type all the meeting minutes and then wait for them to be processed. So even things like Teams and Zoom have got these assistants. So I don't know if you use that or not, but you get a summary, you get action points and things like that. So it's all about making communication easier. So you probably know a lot of this, you know, these kind of tools, what they do, summarize, show you the tasks and so on. ClickUp, I don't know if you've used that, whether that's new, but apparently it can work with all these different programs in one. So I don't know how it does it. It seems to collect the data, and it said, maybe it's something you want to look at if you've got lots of different programs to help you. And then translation. So live translation, that would have been good for me when I was delivering the training in different languages, you know. I don't know how well it works though. It'd be good to test it, wouldn't it, to see if it's actually getting it right. What about Copilot? Has anybody had a go with that? Yeah. It's quite funny, isn't it? You say hello and it says, "Hello, Bina, what can I do for you?" It's like having a conversation with somebody, isn't it, really? Does it make mistakes though, do you think?
Of course. Of course. All these things make what's called the AI hallucination. Always give you like it's not always going to give you accurate things. And even if some people, if you play with it like XO or something, they will cheat and to win.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's not like you have to always fact check all these things you get. And if you don't understand what you're searching for, no matter you will get what you get.
I asked it a question the other day and it gave me an answer in German. I don't know what was going on actually. It's, again, lost in translation. But I mean, ChatGPT, I don't need to go on about that. We've all probably had a go with that as well. So I'm just wrapping up with different kind of tools that are out there. And then, I don't know how we're doing for time, but basically, anybody want to talk about a challenge that you've had? Maybe today. Did you have a communication challenge today? You were trying to get a message across and somebody didn't understand it, or you... Yeah, go ahead.
So often have like issues with accents.
Right.
Especially in the UK, the accent varies a lot from north to south.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, it's amazing, isn't it? It's not a massive country, but yes, there's a lot of difference in accents as well. Yes, And if you go to America, they just spell differently as well, don't they? Yeah, there are those differences actually. Yeah, go ahead.
Is it worth recording and transcribing, like if you're using Teams, do the record and transcribe. It's pretty good at picking up accents, and at least then you would get a written text of what's going on in the meeting in a live kind of format. Maybe just a thought was that, can we record this meeting? And without, you don't need to explain why, and then you get the transcript. Maybe.
That's really good because we're working in a more global community these days, aren't we? Working with a lot of global operators, so it's good to have that availability, really. Anybody want to talk about how they're using AI on the projects at the moment? Is there something you're doing that's really helping you?
I think Jira right now has an AI which kind of summarizes for you the ticket. It's good for me. So like reading like a whole like paragraphs of tickets, I don't just wanna like 2 sentences and that's it.
Yeah,
Which
yeah.
is good for me, yes.
That is good. So is it helping us speed up
Like for me, it's like I'm really dyslexic, and when I read stuff, sometimes I get it wrong. It's like when I read 2 sentences, would be really more careful to read them. But if you give me like 4 or 5 paragraphs, for sure I'm going to read really like I'll understand them really, really badly. Yeah,
yeah. So it's like tailoring the communication to the individual's needs. That's helpful, isn't it? Really, yeah. Sometimes you don't want to read it; you just want to listen to it, don't you? And if it's got that function. Not that I'm lazy or anything, but I like audiobooks.
I think I would say just on that point as well, especially in a business setting, there's lots of really badly written documents, and actually, whether it's even made shorter or not by AI, it's often made better, more readable.
Absolutely. You could even say, if you want to write a paragraph, you could say, this is the word count. It's amazing, isn't it, really? Okay. Anybody, anything else? Any other questions? Any other ideas? No? Okay. In which case, I'll show you my last slide, which is a cat and dog walking away because it stopped raining. All right. That's my last slide. Thank you very much, everybody.